All right, Aftershocks Tremors are bringing you guys some of the best underground hard rock and metal across the globe. And today we're going all the way to Melbourne, Australia. Joining us from Stoner Rock veterans, Don Fernando. We got Andy with us. Andy, what's going on? Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks. Just up early, had to set an alarm so we could,
Yeah,
jump
big time
online.
difference. Yeah, big time difference, obviously, from
Yeah,
Australia to here. But yeah, appreciate you taking the time, getting up early, man. So let's get into it. You guys are getting ready to release your first live album. It's titled "You Are My Blood." It's out digitally, January 21st, excuse me, on Golden Robot Records.
yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but these songs, I believe, were actually recorded some years back, right at your guys' 10th anniversary show, live show. Is that where these songs are from?
Yeah, so they were recorded in 2018.
Okay.
And then with like no huge plan for anything, like for a release or anything, we just recorded them on the night, just for fun, for prosperity.
Okay.
And we had a couple of cameras there as well. So the show's on YouTube. I think it's still
Mhm.
up on YouTube. You can watch the whole show. But yeah, so once we kind of did a mix for the video, we thought, oh, this actually sounds pretty cool. So yeah, we just, and over lockdown, like, what can we do? What's something we
Sure.
can kind of do
Mhm.
to start promoting the band again? And we took all that time off, 2 years, and we weren't doing anything. So
Okay.
yeah, we thought we've got these songs here and let's put them out, and then kind of to get the ball rolling when live shows come back again.
Okay.
Um, and then then we talk about doing another studio album.
I was going to say, yeah, because a lot of times, when bands do take a break and then they come back, if they put out usually a live record, it sort of signals that there's going to be either live performances coming up soon or at least potential for some new music. So yeah, I guess just fill us in. You kind of just did give us a little bit of what's going on with the band. I know you guys haven't really put out new. It's been a while since you put out some new music back in 2015 with Haunted by Humans, but are you guys are you in any sort of writing for any songs right now, or any sort of pre-recording, or you doing anything to kind of maybe get back on the new music trail anytime soon?
Yeah, so we're writing demos at the moment.
Okay.
I've pretty much kind of haven't stopped. I'm always writing demos, and I've got another band called Full Tone Generator, which kind of took over the last 3 or 4 years
Okay.
of playing shows and recording and stuff. So we've just kind of getting Don Fernando fired up again, and hopefully have both bands going simultaneously. But yeah, we've been writing demos, recording demos. At home in the home studio, or we've got a studio as well. I own a studio, so we can go there whenever we want and record more high quality stuff. And then so we're just putting together an album worth of tracks at the moment. We've got all the tracks. We're just kind of fine tuning things, and then we'll probably head into the studio, within the next 3 or 4 months, I'd say.
Okay. Well, very cool, man. Well, since this is the first time I'm talking with you, man, I'm obviously real curious as to, the band's name, Don Fernando, which a lot of us, at least over here, we know as an old male porn star. So I'm assuming there's probably some interesting backstory to you guys naming the band that. Why don't you go ahead and just talk about that for a second?
Yeah, it was actually the band's named after a Chilean coke dealer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was where the name came from. But I was traveling in Chile when I was 21, just backpacking, and met this guy. A friend said, "Oh, this guy's going to rock up with the coke," and yeah, cool. His name's Don Fernando, which I don't think there's an uncommon name. Like it was like Don being like referring to him as someone with authority or seniority or respect. And Fernando being his name, which is a very common name over there. And but this dude just kind of rocked up, and he would have been about 90 years old, driving a gold Mercedes with like a 30-year-old girlfriend. And I just went, "Oh, this dude's a legend." And I said to my friend, we should name a band after this dude. He's a legend." And that was it. That was the story. And I didn't know about this.
Funny.
I didn't know about the porn star.
Yeah, there's an American porn star. Yeah, same.
So he sent us a message eventually.
Oh, he did.
And said,
Okay.
And this is in MySpace days. So
Okay.
On MySpace, he sent us a message and said, "Did you name the band after me?" He said, "I don't mind if you did." but I just wanted to know. And I said, no, sorry, man.
Oh man, you destroyed his ego there. He probably, he's probably all happy that you guys named it after him. But
Yeah, he probably
man.
was.
Yeah, man, that's pretty funny. Well, also just talking about your guys' sound. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it does seem like though the stoner desert rock sound really is something that's has a good stronghold on the Australian rock and metal scene. Bands like yourselves. I mean, off the top of my head, like a band like Witch Skull, they're a great like doom band. I know they're out of Canberra, I believe. And this just over the last year or two, I just get a lot of music sent to me, and a lot of it from Australia is really this kind of sound similar to what you guys do. In your opinion, I mean, why do you think the desert rock sound or that stoner heavy sound is such a big hit with a lot of Australian hard rock and metal fans and musicians? Is it to have anything to do with the fact that maybe a quarter of the terrain and landscape in Australia is desert? I mean, that has anything to do with it, or is it just I think a lot of those bands have obviously come and toured, I know, in Australia over the years and probably built up a loyal following that way as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's anything to do with, like, we've got a lot of desert here, but not many Aussies actually live in the desert. So it's
true. Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, traveling over, because I'm obviously a fan, and I've traveled over to Joshua Tree and hung out over there and been to a festival, just trying to kind of soak up that scene. And got some friends that playing bands and all that kind of stuff in that scene. And it's very different to here, like people living out in the desert over there. But it's I don't know, for us I grew up in like a beach town, like small beach town kind of surfing culture. In the 90s, and for some reason Caius were just a huge part of that culture, that surfing culture.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which seems super strange because they're a desert band from the desert, and they have had a big influence on this kind of surf rock culture. But I think I later found out that some of their songs were featured in like some surfing videos at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think that's how they got into it. And then so Caius were just a band that everyone talked about on the underground kind of rock scene where I grew up. So they influenced a lot of bands just in that local town. So, in the mid 90s, there were all these bands that wanted to sound like Caius. And we just never stopped wanting to sound like Caius.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. Caius, it's a great sound. But the thing about you guys, and this is why I think you guys are a little different than a lot of your musical peers, is vocally. I know you do vocals. I mean, you switch it up between some of those higher pitch, clean vocals, and then the real scream metallic type. I mean, you typically don't see bands within the genre that do that. They usually have, either one or the other sort of style. They typically don't go back and forth. I mean, do you, because a lot of them also don't want to sound too metal. They want to make an emphasis of, we're not a metal band, we're a heavy rock band, we don't want to sound metal. So they leave out those kind of vocals. Do you purposely sort of incorporate that style in order for it to maybe be, sound more metallic, so that you're sort of, able to really separate yourselves? Because the one thing too about, the stoner rock music sound is, and the desert sound is if you don't think outside the box a little bit, and make attempts to sort of expand your sound, a lot of times it just winds up sounding like every other stoner rock band out there. It's hard to really sort of separate yourselves. So do you guys purposely, at least vocally, use those different elements to try to really, just spice it up and make it a little bit different than what we normally hear from those kind of bands?
Yeah, like there was no conscious decision to kind of for one way or the other. The only conscious decision that I've ever made with the songwriting is not to be concerned about fitting into a particular box. Like, okay, and it's obvious that we're influenced, by that kind of desert rock, stoner rock scene. But I'm also influenced by heavier music and heavier bands. So when I feel like a riff kind of where a scream would fit, I just go for it. I'm not too worried about whether that might, put us slightly into a different genre. And some people have kind of said, reviews in the past or reviews of our live show have said it's, we're a bit of a crossover band between stoner and metal. But
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You've kind of, like you said, you've kind of got that doom style where screaming is, it's common, or it's kind of the done thing. Or you've got the stoner rock thing where it's more melodic kind of rock, heavy rock style vocals. Yeah, and we just kind of cross over a bit, and it's never really been too much of a decision one way or the other. We just, if I think the riff's kind of heavy enough and a scream would sound or wouldn't sound out of place, then yeah, I'll chuck it in.
And to go in there. Oh, cool. Very cool. The other thing too, Andy, one of the biggest, I think, challenges for a band that's from Australia that they face is really the geographical location where you guys are compared to the rest of the world. I mean, it's kind of, it's sort of isolated, from the rest of the world. So when you're trying to really break global barriers, it's so challenging because really, I mean, in order to consistently, tour, I mean, it's expensive, I mean, it's really fiscally challenged for you guys to consistently have to, travel to other continents and countries, but you guys are a bit of an exception from a lot of bands from Australia because you guys have toured, UK and Europe and South America. But like I said, obviously it's hard to do that on a consistent basis. So talk a bit about, a little bit about the challenges and some of the difficulties that, bands like yourself, face, bands from Australia face in order to try to, get noticed outside of there so that you're able to sort of widen your reach and get on, some of the bigger festivals that are out there every year.
Yeah. It's super hard. And when we started the band, in 2006-ish, around then, 2007, it was like, that was kind of like my goal was to be a band that toured internationally. And my motivation for that was purely because I love traveling. So
okay,
I thought if I can just combine those two things, rock and roll and traveling, then that would just kind of be the perfect lifestyle, which we tried, I tried really hard to do. And like there's obviously the cost. Like our first tour, which was to the UK and Europe in like 2009, was, we were so excited because we kind of locked in this tour and we had an agent and things were going pretty well at the time. We just released our first album. And then we get over there, which was like super, super exciting. And you're playing every night of the week. But then you're playing those Monday nights, Tuesday nights where there's like 10, 15 people rocking up to the shows. Like it's not glamorous. It's underground, independent rock and roll. And there's no money, you're losing money. Obviously you're losing money every day. You've hired a van, you've hired the back line, and you're just losing money. But I suppose for us, the goal wasn't really, at that stage to make any money. The goal was just to do it. So, we did that first tour and then we kept following up with, more tours and then trying to look at different markets. Like South America was super cool. And that was an interesting one. Like there's more people would come to the shows because I think they were really keen and stoked that, that an Australian band had made the effort to go on tour there. But there's still very little money in it. The cover charge there might be $5 and the promoter said, if you increase that cover charge to say $20, then the people aren't going to come. So, because that was, 10 years ago. So that $20 Australian would be a lot of money for someone in Brazil. So,
sure.
Yeah. And, we've got to play some cool festivals over there, which was a lot of fun. But it is super challenging. The other challenge when you're just an independent band, is having members that can be in a position where they're able to tour.
Yeah.
Because taking a month or 6 weeks off work to go and tour in a band where you're not going to get paid is like,
yeah,
it's a big call. And we got to that age also where we all started having kids. So it was like, well, can you go on tour next year? And the bass player might be like, nah, man, I can't tour. I've got 2 kids. I've got to keep my job. I can't just leave work for a month. And, that's the reality of kind of the level that we're at. And I've always kind of maybe hoped or aspired to, of course, getting to that point where touring would be financially viable or rewarding. But we haven't got there, and obviously the last 2 years have killed that for everybody. But
sure.
You've got to really decide, I think, that you want to play internationally and be prepared to do it just for the kicks, just for the fun. And that's the way I kind of look at it. It's like, other people will go to Europe for a holiday for a month and blow, 30 grand on a holiday.
Mhm.
At least we break even. We don't lose
That's
much.
true.
It doesn't
That's good.
usually it doesn't cost anything. It's just,
Uh-huh.
yeah, if you can break even on a tour, I think you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think you made it exactly. And like I said, yeah, you're not your young 20s anymore. You can't just get up and go and you have a lot of responsibilities. It's tough. But and the good thing about you guys is, you did play one hell of a festival, as you were talking about, the Desert Fest, I know back at 2015. Talk about that experience in terms of what that did really to you guys for sort of like your overall sense of worth as a band. Playing that show is a major deal. Like you said, I mean, it's one thing when you're trying to set up a tour and play in front of 10 or 15 people, as you mentioned, but to play at a festival like that with all those, great bands and the ones that are in the top of the genre right there, I mean, that's got to at least make you feel really good and confident, going home back to Australia thinking, okay, we're doing something right here. And, people are at least starting to take notice. And, there's nothing like being at that festival, for something like that.
Yeah, definitely. It was great for us. And it's a big boost to the confidence level, and just to be able to start seeing your name, up there next to other bands, the bigger bands in the genre that are professional, full-time bands. And it gives you that little boost that, if we keep plugging away, we'll maybe get, a little bit higher up the chain of that kind of style, in that style of music, and be able to tour more, or at least tour more internationally. But yeah, it's really cool. And just the experience of being there is awesome. Like jumping up and doing your set, and then, you're standing backstage and one of the dudes from Red Fang is standing there. You can go and have a chat, or, Brant Bjork, or, dudes from bands that you've really idolized for the last 20, 30 years, and kind of being able to just have a chat and kind of hang with those guys and shoot the shit is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to feel great, man. Well, do you think too, I mean, being, you guys are a great example of it. I mean, it took you, a while, about 10 years or so, right, to get to that point where you could play a festival like that. Do you think, as a band, that when you've worked so hard to get to something like that, it's almost like you kind of reached a pinnacle in a sense, where like you said, you have a goal, and here it is. It's like, okay, we got on the biggest festival within our genre, pretty much. It almost feels like, okay, like you've accomplished your mission in a way. Does that sort of, like, after experiencing something like that, when you come back home and you start to think about what next, does it kind of get you to a place where you're like, well, we've grinded it so much to get there that it's so satisfying enough just playing that show that you just sort of maybe take a step back, and maybe, you don't necessarily grind it out as much anymore, because you feel like you've met your goal in a way. And then anything else that you do afterwards is sort of like icing on the cake in a way. Did that kind of like come about when you guys finished playing Roburn, came home and went on a hiatus there for a few years? Did it feel sort of like that, where you met this goal and now maybe we're just going to kind of chill for a bit and relax?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think, for me, it probably fires me up more, like thinking, okay, now we've got a little bit of momentum. Here's
okay,
here's a time, here's a bit of an opportunity to try and capitalize on it. But you also kind of come back down to earth pretty quick. You maybe play your next show in your hometown, and maybe not as many people come to the show as what you thought were going to come. And there's lots of little things like that. Like you think, oh, we've got this momentum now. And that's, I suppose, just the ride of being in a band. Like sometimes you play great shows and sometimes you play shitty shows, and it can burst your bubble a little bit. But for us, we kind of mainly went on a hiatus because we're having our drummer had moved to Germany, and we were using like other drummers, having like, I suppose, fill-in drummers, but we'd never kind of locked a new drummer in to the lineup, like a new full-time drummer. So that kind of led to us really having a bit of a hiatus. Yeah, and then I started that other project, Full-Time Generator, because we had and it was more of a recording project initially, but yeah, so I kind of just put Don Fernando on hiatus and started this other project. So that was kind of what happened there. But
Okay.
yeah, definitely, you know, we're trying to ramp things up again and looking into how we might be able to get back onto, you know, some festival circuits and shows in Europe and in the States. You know, after we probably do a studio album, we'll start then looking again at getting onto international tours and hopefully, you know, that's something that hopefully in maybe 6 to 12 months it'll be more stable, because even now it still seems that like bands are touring but shows are still getting cancelled and festivals are still getting cancelled, especially in Europe. So yeah, it's maybe 6 to 12 months we can focus on recording an album, and then hopefully in a year things will be more stable. Who knows?
Hopefully, I know. Yeah, who knows? You're right. I mean, hopefully, but at least in the meantime, you guys do have your new live album coming out. It's titled "You Are My Blood." It's out January 21st on Golden Robot Records. And Andy, why don't you just go ahead and I guess let the listeners know where to find info on the band's music, merch, and all the happenings that are going on with the band.
Yep. So obviously Golden Robot Records are releasing the live album, so that'll be, you know, on all of your streaming services online. And then merch, you can go to our Bandcamp page, and we've got some, you know, a lot of very limited stock of merch, but we've got to fire that up again. But yeah, at the moment there's mainly just some records and stuff available on there. That's about it. We don't really have a web page anymore, which is probably not, you know, the smartest decision as far as, you know, promoting the band. But we find most people go through Instagram or Facebook. Everything's social media these days. So our Facebook page keeps everyone updated on whether we're doing shows. We've got a show next week in Melbourne, which is a launch for the album. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because a lot of shows are cancelling. Like Rona's just gone nuts in Melbourne the last couple of weeks. So shows are cancelling, not because, you know, they're not permitted to go ahead, but just because it's, you know, if you can get a show with 3 or 4 bands on the bill and no one gets corona leading up to the show, like you're very lucky. So we're just all fingers crossed that no one's going to actually get coronavirus in the next week, and then we can actually play a show next weekend. But yeah, very cool. All right, man. Well, once again, the band is Don Fernando. The album is "You Are My Blood." Comes out January 21st. And Andy, man, thanks so much for coming on Aftershocks. And yeah, good luck with everything. And I can't wait to hear you guys put out some new music, hopefully within the next year or so. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us. All right, thanks, Eddie. Cheers.